For 4 seasons, welcome back, Kotter turned a Brooklyn remedial classroom into one of the biggest sitcoms in America and turned a 21-year-old unknown named John Travolta into a movie star. But behind the laugh track, the real story was darker. One sweat hog was nearly killed at a producer's mansion in 1980. Another drank himself into an early grave after losing the love of his life on September 11th. This is what Hollywood never told you about the sweat hogs. Let's find out what really happened to them by 2026. Marsha Strassman. Marsha Strassman played Julie Kotter, the steady, supportive wife who anchored the chaos around her when she was 27 years old. On screen, she seemed like the calm at the center of the storm. Off-screen, however, she was anything but protected. When Strassman pushed for a higher salary, producer James Comack allegedly retaliated by spreading false rumors to her male co-stars, claiming she wanted them fired. It was a quiet, calculated way to isolate her on set and undercut her leverage. However, it was a chance because the real payday came years later. Strassman secured back-end profit participation on Disney's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids in 1989, a deal that became her most significant source of wealth in the years that followed. Then, in 2014, she was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer that had metastasized to her bones. Before she died on October 24, 2014, at 66, she partnered with Stand Up to Cancer to help establish a private research fund focused on metastatic breast cancer, one that has since raised over $1 million. Gabe Kaplan. In 1975, at 30, Gabe Kaplan created and starred as Gabe Kotter, the teacher who returned to his old high school to mentor a class of underachieving students. This role was wrote with his own stand-up comedy in mind. As a result, the show became a hit almost overnight. Behind the scenes, though, it wasn't treating him well. Producer James Comack reportedly underpaid him relative to the show's success. And by season 4, frustrated with the arrangement, Kaplan walked away from the series entirely. What happened next had nothing to do with acting. He took his savings and poured them into commercial real estate across New Jersey and Las Vegas. Then he found an entirely different stage. Kaplan became a professional poker player, earning over $1.99 million in live tournament winnings, including a title at Amarillo Slim's Super Bowl of Poker. He later became a major stakeholder and host of High Stakes Poker, a role that's generated steady income for decades. By 2026, at 81, Kaplan has fully retired and lives privately in California, with a net worth estimated at $50 million. The sitcom made him famous. The poker table made him rich. John Sylvester White. 18 years before this show, John Sylvester White had already given up on acting once. He'd taken a regular sales job instead, worn down by an industry he found ungrateful. Then in 1975, at 55, he came back. He played Mr. Woodman, the vice principal whose exasperation with the sweat hogs became one of the show's most quoted running jokes. The role made him famous all over again. His comeback actually started a few years earlier than that, with small guest spots on Kojak and Beretta in the early 1970s. None of it carried the weight of what he'd done decades earlier. In the early 1950s, White had starred as Keith Barron, the first husband on the soap opera Search for Tomorrow, a role that had once made him a recognizable face on daytime television. After Welcome Back, Kotter ended, the work didn't stop entirely. He picked up a small role on Mama's Family in the early 1980s, closing out a career that spanned nearly 4 decades of television. However, it still didn't make him rich. The show aired in syndication for decades, generating huge revenue for the network. White barely saw any of it. The residual contracts of that era gave actors next to nothing for reruns, no matter how many times the show played. By the late 1980s, his health was failing. He used what little he'd saved to buy a small condo in Waikiki, Hawaii. He died there on September 11, 1988, at 68, from pancreatic cancer. Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs. In 1975, at 22, Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs became Freddie Boom Boom Washington. the smooth-talking sweat hog with the catchphrases everyone in school started repeating. He's the only original cast member who showed up for all 95 episodes. The same year Kotter premiered, he was already starring in Cooley High. 2 years later, he joined the cast of Roots. Then, in 1992, came the role that proved he was more than just a sitcom face. He played Joe Jackson in The Jacksons, an American dream, taking on a man the public had already decided to hate, and finding something human in him instead. The miniseries won an Emmy. Hilton-Jacobs earned an NAACP Image Award nomination for it. Of course, like a discourage, he kept going. In 2016, he showed up in Rob Zombie's horror film, 31. 5 years after that, nearly half a century since Kotter first aired, he picked up a Daytime Emmy nomination for A House Divided. By 2026, at 72, he's still taking roles around Los Angeles, closing in on 100 acting credits. His net worth sits around $1.5 million. Built quietly, year after year, through a SAG pension and steady work. Not one massive payday. Robert Hegyes. Robert Hegyes was 24 in 1975 when he became Juan Epstein, the streetwise sweat hog famous for his forged hall passes. The character made him a fan favorite overnight. But the paycheck told a different story. Under the syndication system of that era, Hegyes kept getting residual checks worth only a few dollars, even as the show replayed thousands of times across the country. It made him furious. Eventually, he walked away from Hollywood entirely to teach at Rowan University. He didn't disappear completely, though. He later returned for a stretch on Cagney and Lacey, and used part of what he earned for something bigger than himself. He helped establish the Robert Hegyes Scholarship Fund for the Arts at Rowan University, built specifically to protect young, low-income students from the kind of exploitation he says he lived through. He died of a heart attack at his home in New Jersey on January 26, 2012. He was 60 years old. Ron Palillo was 26 when he created Arnold Horshack in 1975. The sweat hog with the wheezing laugh and the desperate cry of, "Ooh, ooh, Mr. Kotter!" Few people knew where that laugh actually came from. Palillo had lost his father to lung cancer when he was just 10. The sound he built into Horshack's laugh, the one that made America howl every week, was modeled on his father's labored breathing in his final days. For 4 years, that laugh made him famous. Then the show ended, and the door he expected to open stayed shut. He picked up guest spots: Alice, Chips, the A-Team. He landed steady voice work, even leading an animated series. But the bigger roles never came. Palillo later admitted in interviews that Horshack had quietly become a cage. Casting directors couldn't see past him. At one point, he had plastic surgery. By 2002, the offers had thinned out enough that he said yes to something humiliating: a televised boxing match on Celebrity Boxing, where he was paid to take real punches from Dustin Diamond. That fight became a turning point. He walked away from chasing screen roles and went back to where he'd started: the stage. He played Mozart in Amadeus. He took on a brutal one-man show in 2000, portraying Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann off-Broadway. Eventually, he stopped performing altogether and started teaching, first at his old college in Connecticut, then in 2010 at a performing arts school in Florida, guiding teenagers who were just starting out in an industry he understood better than almost anyone. On August 14, 2012. At 4 in the morning, Ron Palillo had a heart attack at home. He was 63. Charles Fleischer. Nobody really remembers Carvelli. He was the minor troublemaker Charles Fleischer played at 25 years old in 1975, a character built to disrupt one scene and exit quickly. Fleischer had actually started out wanting to be a doctor. He studied medicine at Southampton College, then abandoned that path entirely to study acting at Chicago's Goodman School of Drama. By the time he landed in Los Angeles in 1974, comedy clubs and small television roles were paying the bills, including stints on both Welcome Back Kotter, and Laverne and Shirley. For over a decade, that's mostly what his career looked like. Then, in 1988, everything changed. Fleischer became the voice of Roger Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit and went on to win 3 Academy Awards. He reportedly insisted on wearing a full Roger Rabbit costume on set just to stay locked into the character while recording opposite his human co-stars. That single role didn't end when the movie left theaters. Disney kept him attached to Roger for years afterward, through theatrical shorts, the Chippendale Rescue Rangers hybrid film, and appearances built directly into the parks, including a recorded video that still plays for guests waiting in line at Disneyland's Space Mountain. Every one of those uses came with its own paycheck, turning a single voice performance into a recurring source of income that outlasted nearly every other role on his resume. By 2026, at 75, Fleischer is still showing up at fan conventions, including a Pasadena Comic-Con appearance in May, signing autographs for a character he voiced nearly 4 decades ago. His net worth sits at roughly $3 million, the vast majority of it traced back to one studio deal in 1988 that never really stopped paying him. Vernee Watson. She got her SAG card at 17 for a single spoken line in a 1970 film and never really stopped working after that. 5 years later, at 27, Vernee Watson joined Welcome Back, Kotter as Verna Jean Williams, the sharp-tongued sweat hog who could hold her own against the entire classroom. She only appeared in 13 episodes, but it barely mattered. While other cast members rode the wave of one defining sitcom, Watson built something different in the years that followed. Carter Country in the late 1970s, Foley Square in the 80s, steady, consistent work that rarely made headlines but never stopped coming. Then came the part that made her a household name to an entirely new generation. From 1990 to 1996, she played Viola Vi Smith, Will Smith's mother, on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. She kept going. 2.5 Men, The Big Bang Theory, Criminal Minds, ER Desperate Housewives. Decade after decade, never typecast, never disappearing. In 2017, she joined General Hospital as Stella Henry, a role that earned her back-to-back Daytime Emmy Awards in 2018 and 2019. By 2026, at 76, she's still on General Hospital with a net worth of roughly $2 million. Built one role at a time across more than 50 straight years of television work. The sweat hog with the smallest episode count outlasted nearly everyone else from that classroom. Melonie Haller. Melonie Haller was 19 when producers brought her in Angie Grabowski to break new ground. She became the first female sweat hog on Welcome Back, Kotter, refreshing a show entering its final, struggling season. The role didn't last. By the time her storyline faded out, her career was already losing momentum, and she was searching for anything that might keep it alive. In April 1980, an invitation arrived. A party at the 72-room Southampton mansion of theatrical producer Roy Radin, a man with real influence over which young actresses got cast next. She went with a date, businessman Robert McKeague IV, hoping the night might lead somewhere useful. It nearly killed her instead. The next morning, a railroad conductor found Haller unconscious and bleeding on a Manhattan-bound train. She was rushed to Brookhaven Memorial Hospital. In testimony to a Suffolk County grand jury, she described being beaten, sexually assaulted, and forced into acts that were filmed by people at the party. The case went to federal court. In January 1981, McKeague pleaded guilty to second-degree assault and was sentenced to 30 days in jail. Radin pleaded guilty separately to illegal possession of a firearm found in the mansion and was fined $1,000 and placed on probation. Despite her testimony, no one was ever convicted of rape. Her clothing had been washed before police could test it, and her medical examination didn't happen until 2 days after the assault. After the case, Haller changed her name and stepped away from Hollywood almost entirely. By 2026, at 67, she lives privately, far from the industry that once promised to make her a star and instead left her fighting simply to be believed. Ellen Travolta. She played Mrs. Horshack O'Hara in 3 episodes of Welcome Back, Kotter in 1977, sharing scenes with her younger brother John, who'd already become the breakout star of the show. It would have been easy for her career to live entirely in his shadow, but it didn't. Ellen had been training for the stage since Carnegie Mellon, touring nationally in Gypsy alongside Ethel Merman before she ever appeared on television. Once she did, the roles kept coming. She landed a recurring part as Luisa Arcola Del Vecchio on Happy Days, playing the aunt of Fonzie and mother of Chachi, a character popular enough to follow her into the spin-off Joni Loves Chachi. A decade later, she returned to playing Scott Baio's mother a 3rd time, this time as Lillian on Charles in Charge from 1987 to 1990. She kept working well past that. In the 1990s, she joined General Hospital as Gloria Cerullo, a role she returned to decades later, picking it back up for storylines as recently as 2023 through 2025. Her personal life held its own quiet stability, too. She married actor Jack Bannon in 1983, and the two toured together performing love letters for years afterward until his death in 2017. By 2026, at 86, Ellen Travolta has built something her famous brother's fame never overshadowed completely. A 6-decade career spanning theater, sitcoms, and daytime drama, carried entirely on her own name. Debralee Scott. At 22, Debralee Scott played Rosalie Hotsy Totsy Totsy during the show's very first season. However, it was just one of several roles she was juggling at the peak of a career that, for a few years, seemed unstoppable. She was everywhere back then. Mary Hartman, Forever Fernwood. A regular face on the game show circuit, popping up on Match Game and the $20,000 Pyramid. By the mid-1980s, she'd landed roles in Police Academy and its sequel, proof the work never fully dried up. Then, in the 1990s, she stepped behind the camera, working as a talent agent in New York. In 1995, she met John Dennis Levi, a police officer with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. They got engaged, with a wedding planned for March 2002. On September 11, 2001, Levi was killed while helping evacuate people from the Twin Towers. Scott never recovered. Her grief turned into a drinking problem that worsened year after year, eventually developing into cirrhosis of the liver. In March 2005, she moved to Amelia Island, Florida, to live with her older sister. Shortly after arriving, she collapsed into a coma. Sooner, she was released from the hospital on her 52nd birthday, April 2nd, seemingly fine. 3 days later, on April 5th, 2005, she lay down for a nap and never woke up. Her sister later said simply that Debralee never got over Dennis's death. His mother put it more bluntly. The drinking started the day the towers fell, and it never really stopped until it took her too. Linda McCullough. 3 episodes. That's all it took for Linda McCullough to come and go from Welcome Back, Kotter. She joined the show in 1978, playing a minor character named Sally during the final season, barely registering against the bigger personalities already filling that classroom. She picked up scattered work afterward, a few episodes of BJ and the Bear, a stint as a rent-a-car clerk on the misadventures of Sheriff Lobo, even some voice work decades later on the Knight Rider reboot team Knight Rider in 1997. None of it built into a lasting acting career, so she stopped chasing one. Rather than keep auditioning for an industry that clearly wasn't chasing her back, McCullough walked away entirely and built a different kind of life in Los Angeles, working as a photographer, painter, and designer. After all, she never had to keep fighting an industry that had already moved on, choosing instead to build something steady and entirely her own. Susan Lanier. She played Bambi Forster, the flirtatious sweat hog who made a move on Mr. Kotter himself, before setting her sights on Vinnie Barbarino, joining the cast in 1975 at 28 years old, a recurring presence over the show's first 2 seasons. That wasn't even close to her biggest near miss that decade. In 1976, Lanier was actually cast as Chrissy Snow in the second pilot of Three's Company, the role that would go on to make Suzanne Summers a household name. A BC filmed the pilot with Lanier in the part, watched it back, and quietly replaced her before the show ever aired. It's the kind of decision that can quietly end a career before it even gets going. Instead of disappearing, she went in a completely different direction. In 1977, Lanier landed the lead role of Brenda Wood in Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes, a low-budget horror film about a family torn apart by mutant cannibals in the desert. It became a cult classic, and it made her one of the genre's original scream queens. She kept working steadily through the late 1970s and 1980s, picking up roles across Barnaby Jones, Policewoman, 8 is Enough, and Days of Our Lives, while also marrying musician Delaney Bramlett, a songwriter whose career stretched back to Eric Clapton and George Harrison's circles. Eventually, she stepped away from chasing acting work full-time and built something new. Lanier became a portrait photographer, shooting album covers, book covers, and magazine work, and in 2005 was voted one of LA's top 10 photographers by Backstage West. Her husband died in 2008. The marriage itself was later legally contested by one of his children, who argued in court that he hadn't been mentally fit when he signed his estate over to her, a dispute that dragged the final years of their relationship into a courtroom. By 2026, at 79, Lanier is still active in independent film and photography around Los Angeles, including a 2026 appearance at a premiere for the film Fathers. Helaine Lembeck. In the spring of 1975, a 23-year-old actress named Helaine Lembeck stepped onto the set of Welcome Back, Kotter to play Judy Borden. Judy was different from anyone else in that classroom. Sharp, straight-A, editor of the school newspaper, she went toe-to-toe with the sweat hogs and held her own against every one of their insults. She even briefly dated Vinnie Barbarino, the show's resident heartthrob. Behind that role sat a family already deeply rooted in comedy. Her father, Harvey Lembeck, had spent decades as a respected character actor, best known for playing the comedic foil to Phil Silvers and for his role in the Beach Party film series. Then came January 1982. Within moments, he had a heart attack right there in the studio. He was 58. The workshop could have ended with him. Helaine and her brother Michael, an actor and director in his own right, stepped in and kept it running, carrying forward the same improv-based methods their father had spent a lifetime developing. Over the following decades, that workshop quietly became one of the most respected training grounds in Hollywood comedy, shaping the early careers of John Ritter, Robin Williams, and John Larroquette. After Kotter, she picked up guest roles on Charlie's Angels, Simon and Dynasty. She kept working steadily in voice and ADR roles for decades, contributing to films like Enchanted and The Time Traveler's Wife. As recently as 2019, she appeared in an episode of Sneaky Pete. By 2026, at 74, she's still teaching at the workshop her father built, married to William Woff since 1984, with 2 children of her own. Most of her castmates spent the years after Kotter chasing the next role. Lembeck spent them building the place where the next generation of stars would learn how to get one. Denise Galik. At 26 in 1977, Denise Galik appeared in 2 episodes of Welcome Back, Kotter as Paula Holtzgong, a sharp, attention-grabbing presence who briefly turned the sweat hogs' heads. It was a small role in a much longer story. That same era, Galik was working constantly, picking up guest spots on The Incredible Hulk, Charlie's Angels, and the Eddie Capra Mysteries. The kind of steady, recurring work that filled the resumes of working actresses who never became household names, but never stopped getting hired either. In 1980 alone, she appeared in Oh God, Book 2, the cult horror film Humanoids from the Deep, and the thriller Don't Answer the Phone. roles that leaned heavily on her looks in an industry that, at the time, rarely offered women much else. She found steadier ground in daytime television. From 1980 to 1981, she played Linda Stryker on Knots Landing. She moved through Flamingo Road, then landed her most enduring role, Rhonda Wexler, on General Hospital from 1992 to 1994, a part she returned to twice more on the spin-off Port Charles in 1997 and again in 2001. In 1984, she also took on the role of Maggie Blodgett in the miniseries V: The Final Battle, one of the most watched television events of that decade. By 2026, at 75, Galik has largely stepped back from acting, her last notable screen credit dating to the mid-2000s, including appearances on Da Vinci's Inquest and Law and Order: Criminal Intent. So that's a look back at the Welcome Back, Kotter cast then and now in 2026. While some found lasting success, others faced heartbreaking losses, health struggles, and life-changing challenges that few fans ever knew about. Which cast member surprised you the most? And who was your favorite sweat hog? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more then and now updates.